Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have just seen some scenes of Little Tokyo, which is the Japanese section of Los Angeles. And it is my understanding that about 70% of the total of approximately 350,000 Japanese Americans living on the mainland of the United States reside in the greater Los Angeles area. And today and a week from today, we are going to talk about the subject of Japanese Americans, or Americans of Japanese ancestry, often abbreviated to AJAs. And in order to deal with this subject, we have two young Sansei Americans as our guests. But before I introduce these gentlemen to you, I would like to very briefly mention the subjects that we are intending to cover. And as I have written them down on the blackboard, our conversation is going to consist of the four items. In the first place, we are going to talk about what an American of Japanese ancestry is. And in order to help you understand what an AJA is, we are going to very briefly talk about the principle of the soil versus the principle of the blood, the terms which are used in international jurisprudence in order as the determinant of one's allegiance or one's passport, so to speak. And there is a great deal of difference in these practices between Japan and the rest of the world, including the United States. So a mention of these two principles hopefully will help you to better understand what an AJA means. In the second place, we would like to look back upon a 100-year history of Japanese immigration to the United States. And thirdly, we're going to talk about what is known as the yellow power, which obviously is a takeoff on the black power in regard to the black Americans, or the red power with respect to American Indians. And the subtitle that I have chosen for this portion of our program is From a Banana to a Papaya. I'm sure that you are at a loss not knowing what it really means, but I hope that our subsequent conversations will help you clarify this somewhat elusive slogan. And fourthly, if time permits, we would like to enumerate some of the better known American Japanese or Japanese Americans, some notables from the political arena, from the academic community, and so on. So let me introduce two guests for today and a week from today. One gentleman is Mr. Paul Nagano, who hails originally from Honolulu. And when Paul was in high school, I used to know him very well. And of course, it's a long time ago. Paul is a painter by profession. And he now lives in Boston. But let me ask him to introduce himself in terms of his background, in terms of the purpose of his visit to our shores this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kunihiro. I'm delighted to be here. I was born in Honolulu, as you mentioned, and went through high school there, then went to Columbia in New York City, where I majored in English with a BA in English, after which I was in the Navy, in the Supply Corps, and after the Navy in art school in Philadelphia for 4 years, and since then I've been in Boston working for an art gallery and painting.
The shirt you wear is obviously an aloha shirt from Honolulu, is it not?
No, it's not.
It's not.
Men's fashions have changed so that the United States has more peacocks than it used to have.
I see. And you, of course, joined the Navy and saw the world. This is not your first visit to Japan,
no,
is it?
This is not. I was here twice with the Navy, back in 1960, early 1960s and returned 3 years ago on a civilian visit for a month, and this is now my 4th time.
I see. We have another guest in the person of Mr. Lawrence Tyra, a Sansei from the mainland, and I have known Mr. Tyra for quite some time. Now, would you introduce yourself, Lawrence?
All right, Mr. Kanehiro. I hail from Fresno, California, which is a very quiet agriculture community in the heart of California, known for William Saroyan, the notable writer, and also Sun-Made Raisins, in case you have any raisin lovers out there. And I grew up in high school there, completed high school and moved on to the Bay region, California, attended the University of California, Berkeley, and also finished at San Francisco State University, majoring in psychology. Subsequently, I had a series of nondescript jobs, which I don't want to go into now, and then finally found my way over here in Japan about 3 years ago. I've been working at an international marketing and research company, and that's it.
All right. I know, Lawrence, that you are a great believer in and advocate of the yellow power, to which we shall refer perhaps a little later. Now, the first item that we are going to deal with or cover is this business of the different systems or procedures which are employed as the determinant of one's allegiance. In Japan, as you know, even if a person is born right in the heart of Tokyo, in Shibuyaku, Tokyo, for example, where NHK is located, he cannot be automatically a Japanese subject unless his father is a Japanese subject. In other words, the principle that we subscribe to is known as the principle of the blood, or the personal principle. Whereas in the United States, by virtue of birth in American territory, one can become automatically an American citizen, irrespective of his parentage, his racial, ethnic background. And of course, the United States is known as the melting pot of all races, ethnic groups, and so on. And therefore, it is sometimes very difficult for the average Japanese to understand what a Nisei or a Sansei is. And I'm sure that both of you have encountered a situation in which the purity of your blood was questioned. Would you give us some concrete anecdotal examples of this kind?
Yes, just the other day I was in a bar with a friend, and he introduced me as an American, and the bartender looked closely at me.
Suspiciously?
Perhaps. No, not more curiously than suspiciously, and said, "Isn't it interesting? He looks just like a Japanese."
Lawrence, I'm sure you have run into a situation like that.
Yes, the only difference between Paul is I've run into more of them than he has because I've been here longer, and it never stops to amaze me when it happens. And the same reaction is the same as Paul experienced. They're very surprised. I'm an American, and then they usually say, "But you look Japanese," and I think that's a very important clue into what you're talking about.
Were you sometimes mistaken for mixed blood? I mean, konketsuji, as we say in Japanese? No?
In my case, I haven't, because I have a very Japanese, perhaps more Japanese than some other Japanese I see walking in Tokyo today. But they do say, "Are your parents Japanese?" And again, that puzzles me because I don't know what they're referring to as the soil or the citizenship or the blood or whatever, and that's the point you're trying to make.
Yes.
And so we have a long discussion usually following that.
Both of you are sanseis, right?
Yes, that's right.
Now, what is a sansei, and what's the difference between a sansei and a nisei? Would you tell us that? Would you tell something about it for the benefit of our audience?
Well, in my case, Nisei means is the first generation born on American soil. My grandparents are Issei, and my parents are Nisei, and I am Sansei. actually, it's third generation, but it's really the second generation born on American soil.
Lawrence, your grandparents came from which prefectures of Japan?
My grandfather is, I guess you would call him an exception. He came from Niigata-ken originally. He was from Niigata-ken. And my grandmother is from Tokyo.
I see. On the paternal side, that is?
Yes.
Your grandfather?
Yes, on my paternal side.
And on your maternal side?
Tokyo and somewhere else, I'm not sure.
And my parents, my mother's family is Yamaguchi-ken.
Yamaguchi-ken, yes.
My father's is Fukuoka-ken.
I see. I think, as you mentioned, Lawrence, there are very few Japanese Americans who are originally from Niigata Prefecture, whereas there are quite a few Japanese Americans originating in Yamaguchi, Fukuoka, Wakayama, for that matter, a bit from Iwate-ken, of all places, yes. All right, thank you very much. We would like to move on to our second item, and that is a very brief historical background or history of the Japanese immigration to the United States. And of course, you are from Hawaii, and it is my understanding that the first group of Japanese immigrants arrived at Honolulu in the year of 1868 at the time of the Meiji Restoration.
Yes, that's right. My grandparents came
later than that, I see. And in your case, of course, it is again my understanding that the first group arrived at the mainland of the United States a year later, a year after the first arrival at Honolulu.
That's right. But I think that was an exceptional group that came because there was an American entrepreneur that was involved in bringing over the first Japanese group. But the main body, the mainstream of the Japanese migration didn't occur until later, probably in the 80s and 90s, 1880s, 1890s, the bulk.
And then during the mid and late Taisho period, the Japanese Americans were exposed to a great deal of harassment and anti-Japanese sentiments, particularly in California. No more Japs and the Yellow Peril and that sort of thing was very much referred to, and they were perhaps they were discriminated against by the American bigots. Now, any comments coming from you on this particular subject? And don't mince your words, please.
No. Well, it's just a matter of do we have enough time, because I do have a lot of strong feelings about that. But yes, especially the Issei's went through tremendous turmoil, and it's almost unimaginable. I didn't experience it personally. I've read about it, I've heard about it, and it's almost unbelievable. The newspaper headlines were reading like, the Yellow Perils here, the Japs will take over the state, and so forth and so on. And this was following the Chinese migration, which made it as equally as bad. And I think people cannot imagine the atmosphere which pervaded at that time, the anti-Japanese sentiment. It was so strong. And even some notable newspapers like the Hearst publication was strongly against the Japanese, and they wanted to, of course, the immigration laws came in I think, late 20s, early 20s, 1920s.
Right.
There are two of them or so. And that's why there are not more Japanese Americans in California today.
Any comments on this point coming from you, Paul?
Well, things were a little different in Hawaii, and possibly it was a matter of numbers. For example, when World War II began, my father was, he lost his job. He was working as an accountant, but it was a sensitive company.
Yes.
And so in his case, why very definitely there was the war was the thing that precipitated the discrimination.
In other words, your father was regarded as a security risk.
Yes, yes. But on the whole, I think in the context of American history, the Japanese before the war were probably not treated very much differently from most minority groups who arrived as immigrants, poor, were there primarily as a labor source. I don't think it's a unique thing.
I see. But the Japanese, if I remember rightly, were regarded as particularly unassimilable into the mainstream of American life, and perhaps they were more discriminated against even than the Chinese, especially when U.S.-Japanese relations were far from desirable, whereas China was on the side of the United States, especially immediately before the outbreak of the Pacific War.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
So we have to talk about the mass evacuation of American Japanese, which was occasioned by the issuance of the executive order number 9066 by President Roosevelt 2 months after the outbreak of the Pacific War, after Pearl Harbor, that is, and 110,000 American Japanese, 2/3 of whom were American citizens, were consigned to 10 relocation centers, right? Mm-hmm. And did your grandparents or parents suffer that?
Yes, my parents and myself and my other brothers mm-hmm. were relocated to a center in Arkansas, Jerome. There's a swamp that surrounded us, so a natural barrier. Mm-hmm. They didn't need the guards. And my grandparents, my grandfather was considered one of the more dangerous leaders of the Japanese community. So he was sent to the Tule Lake Relocation Center, where most
California.
of the hardcore Japanese loyalists were sent, who were under suspicion at the time. Mm-hmm. And that's where he spent his days. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any
in my case, no. My immediate family was not interned. I had an uncle by marriage who was teaching Japanese.
I see.
But in Hawaii, again, first of all, being insular, not connected with the American mainland, made it less risky, entirely isolated anyway. But also the Japanese population there was primarily involved with agriculture, and it would have meant great hardship for the rest of the population.
Of course, these places were referred to as relocation centers, euphemistically, but in virtual fact, they were internment camps, weren't they?
That's
and
right.
we were watching
Manzanar,
California, which is not too far from San Francisco, Lawrence?
It's in Southern California.
Southern California,
yes,
is that so?
The Japanese Americans in California were relocated according to their geographical location in the state. And Manzanar had mostly Southern Californian Japanese, if I'm not mistaken. And in Central California were sent to Arkansas and also Colorado.
I see.
I think Manzanar has become a symbol of the young awakening of the Yellow Power movement, if you want to call it that, in California.
So it is high time that we talked about this somewhat sensitive subject of the Yellow Power, which I'm sure was instigated or occasioned by the emergence of the Black Power and of the Red Power.
And brown. Don't forget the brown.
The brown power?
Yes.
In the case of Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, I think. Yeah.
Well, and in Hawaii, Hawaiians themselves.
Hawaiians themselves, sure,
yes,
certainly,
yes.
certainly.
The world's filled with minority groups.
Yes. Well, I really don't know how to phrase my question or questions on this particular point, but there is this slogan, from a banana to a papaya. And of course a banana is yellow skin, but inside is white, whereas a papaya is yellow both outside and inside. And now what does this slogan signify, do you think?
Assimilation, I suppose. If you are yellow on the outside and white on the inside, why it means that you become pretty much a part of the white Anglo-Saxon society. I presume also the papaya means that you are through and through Japanese, which I would think is almost impossible for most Japanese Americans, because you are American primarily because you were born there, and you speak a common language with Americans. And I have a strong feeling about the way one feels having to do with language.
Uh-huh.
If you think